Jim Morrison, Ray Manzarek, and John Densmore wanted to keep the Doors together, but they had lost 2 members and were getting no support from their record company. Densmore said he knew a good guitarist, Robby Krieger.
When I first heard about the Doors, John Densmore, who I'd known in school, was telling me about this group that he was in called the Doors, and they had this wild, crazy guy, Jim Morrison, who was going to be the lead singer, even though he couldn't sing at the time. But I knew that they were going to be good because they had these great songs.
The first time Robby rehearsed with the Doors, he played the snaky, bottleneck guitar lines that are the signature of Moonlight Drive. Everyone knew he was perfect. The Doors were fully formed.
Name? Robby Krieger. Age? 22 years old.
Occupation?
Guitar.
Name?
John Densmore.
Age?
23.
Occupation?
Percussionist.
Name?
Raymond Daniel Manzarek.
Age?
Born 2/12/39.
Occupation?
Musician, organist.
Name?
Jim.
Occupation?
Some of those who came to hear the Doors rehearse thought they were too weird. Jim went through periods of self-doubt as a singer. Sometimes he would stand off to the side of the stage. Club owners were bewildered. There was no bass player. Jim didn't look anyone in the eye. No other band sounded like or acted like the Doors. We were all acid heads looking for another way to get high, said Manzarek. We found it in the music. The songs made plenty of room for poetic and musical improvisations. If an interesting tangent popped up, they'd follow it till it reached an emotional crescendo. This gave them an unusual sound, loose but explosive.
The music would settle into a kind of hypnotic river of sound, which would leave me free to kind of make up anything that came into my head at the time.
You see my grasshopper, mama? Looking real good. Uh-oh, I blew it. It's a moth.
At first, the Doors were considered outsiders on the LA scene. But finally, they got a gig at a cheesy Hollywood club called the London Fog. Jim grew more confident on stage, and his singing improved. His blend of insolence and vulnerability seduced many listeners. Before long, the Doors became the house band at the prestigious Whiskey A Go-Go. Jim's improvised passages included lots of sexual innuendo. Often stoned, he'd hurl himself around stage, writhing with the rhythms. Other times, he remained motionless, with his head hung, whispering into the mic. The other Doors reacted to Jim's moves musically. It was a far cry from the bounciness of other LA bands, like Buffalo Springfield or the Byrds.
The mood I get from most of it is kind of a heavy, kind of sort of gloomy feeling, you know? Like of someone not quite at home, or you know, or not quite relaxed.
The booking agent at the Whiskey said Morrison's dirty street clothes weren't right for the stage. She helped him choose a skin-tight leather outfit to wear. Already dangerous looking, Jim took on a regal air. He was a young Adonis with the sexual magnetism of early Elvis. Women made up much of the band's audience. Pam Corson made a point of being at every Doors gig. It wasn't long before she became Morrison's girlfriend. But it was not just the female fans who were captivated by Jim's performances. Crowds gathered each night at the Whiskey to see what kind of crazed theatrics Morrison would come up with. One night, filled to the brim with LSD, he produced a defining moment. During The End, a song about a romantic breakup, Jim improvised a new section that had blatant Oedipal references.
Father, Yes, son. I want to kill you. Mother.
The Doors were fired as soon as they left the stage, but the Sunset Strip buzzed about their performance for weeks. Columbia let the band go without ever releasing an album. Elektra Records moved in. In September of '66, Morrison, Manzarek, Krieger, and Densmore went into the studio with producer Paul Rothchild. Manzarek called the creative process a sort of a seance. The result was one of rock's most electrifying albums. One of the most eerie, too. The first time the Doors tried to capture the end in the studio, it didn't work. Jim was tripping and the focus wasn't there. A few days later, Morrison felt more secure. With all the studio lights off and a single candle burning, the Doors got the take they wanted. 11 minutes long, the end was a testimony to brutal self-examination. It was full of anger, mystery, and destruction. The Doors had captured their essence on tape. Later that night, when the studio was closed, Morrison returned, broke in, and sprayed a fire extinguisher all over the room where he had sung. The end gave the Doors the confidence they needed to go further into theatrical territory. They wanted their music to roam through the listener's psyche.
What do you hope it will do to its audience?
I hope it'll leave them puzzled.
Puzzled's a good word.
But puzzled at liking you or puzzled at disliking you?
That's part of the puzzlement.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day.
Break On Through was the Doors' first single. It was a local hit in LA, but struggled to get on the national charts. Elektra put up a Doors billboard on the Sunset Strip, something that had never been done for rock musicians. It gained the Doors notoriety with the media. In San Francisco, the Doors played the Fillmore Auditorium and Avalon Ballroom. They shared bills with bands as different as the Young Rascals and the Grateful Dead. When they got to New York, the press was waiting for them. Critics heralded the band as a great underground group. The Doors went back to California triumphant. For their second single, Elektra suggested that the Doors release Light My Fire, the first song Robby Krieger had ever written. At 6 minutes, it was way too long. AM radio wouldn't touch it. The label decided to edit out the organ solo in the middle of the track and tested it on the airwaves. It started to move, and FM stations began playing the uncut version as well. By July of 1967, Light My Fire was the #1 single in the country. Weeks, the Doors were rock stars. The wild ride had begun.